It was a rainy Tuesday morning outside a courthouse in a small southern town. The clouds were heavy, matching the mood that lingered in the air, thick with tension, history, and a kind of silence that made people glance over their shoulders. The courtroom was packed. Lawyers shuffled papers, murmured quietly, and the audience, a mix of townspeople and outsiders, sat upright in the wooden benches, waiting for something, anything, to break the stillness. But no one expected what came next. Moments before the judge was supposed to walk in, a commotion broke out near the front of the building. All eyes turned as the doors burst open and a man in a sharp navy suit stumbled inside, panting, soaked to the bone. It was the Deputy Attorney General. He looked shaken, his tie askew, his breath short, and his eyes scanning the room like he wasn't just late, but fleeing. No one knew at first why he looked so rattled. But then behind him, two local police officers charged in after him. Not calmly, not formally. They weren't there to escort or assist. They were yelling, demanding. One of them even reached for his belt. And that's when the courtroom stood still like time had frozen. People whispered, some gasped. Why would two uniformed officers chase one of the highest-ranking legal officials into a courthouse? It didn't make sense, until you saw the faces, the fury in the officers' eyes, the fear in the Deputy Attorney General's. And then you saw something deeper, history repeating itself in a room that was supposed to represent justice. Before things could escalate any further, the judge walked in, earlier than expected, and stopped dead in her tracks. The moment she saw what was happening, her expression dropped. She looked from the officers to the Deputy Attorney General, then to the crowd, as if realizing how bad this looked. Her voice, usually calm and commanding, trembled ever so slightly as she called the court to order. But the room wasn't calm. Not anymore. Just across town, not long before this unfolded, something entirely different but just as powerful was happening. A black teenager named Jamal had boarded a city bus after school, headphones in, backpack at his feet, mind on his part-time shift later that evening. The ride was routine, nothing unusual, until a visibly pregnant white woman stepped onto the bus, looking exhausted, one hand on her stomach, the other gripping the rail. Without thinking twice, Jamal stood up and offered her his seat. She hesitated, looked at him for a moment, then nodded and sat down, thanking him softly. Most people would have thought that was the end of it, just one small, decent gesture. But when she reached her stop, she turned to Jamal, pressed a folded note into his hand, and said, "Please read this when you're alone." Then she disappeared into the evening crowd. What was in that note would change everything for Jamal. 2 stories, 2 lives, one town still haunted by its past, caught between moments of courage and confrontation. On one side of the city, a courtroom is filled with rising tension and quiet fear. On the other, a teenager just trying to do the right thing is handed a message that could turn his entire world upside down. What do the officers really want from the Deputy Attorney General? Why did the judge panic? And what secret did that handwritten note hold that could possibly change Jamal's life forever? This story isn't just about racism or kindness. It's about the split-second decisions that reveal who we are. It's about systems, silence, courage, and consequences. And it's only just begun. Jamal sat at the back of the bus, the note still in his hand. He hadn't opened it yet. Something about the way she gave it to him, the way her eyes held his, just a second too long made him pause. It wasn't just a thank you. There was weight in her voice, like she had been waiting for someone like him. He slipped the note into his backpack, not ready to face whatever was inside just yet. The rest of the ride felt different now. He watched the world outside blur past the foggy windows, but his mind wasn't on the route. It was on her. Back at the courthouse, the judge did something she'd never done before. She called for a brief recess before the proceedings had even begun. The gavel hadn't struck once. She didn't offer a reason. She just asked everyone to step out, then turned sharply toward the bench where the Deputy Attorney General stood, trying to catch his breath. The officers lingered near the entrance. One of them, a tall man with a stiff jaw and narrowed eyes, didn't move an inch. He kept one hand resting on his belt just above the holster. The other officer whispered something to him, but he didn't respond. The judge looked at both of them and said in a low, firm voice, "Officers, I need a moment with him, alone." They didn't like it. You could see it. But they stepped out, slowly. The Deputy Attorney General, Marcus Gray, sank into one of the benches at the front. He looked down, wiped his face with a handkerchief, and finally spoke. "They weren't supposed to know I was coming." The judge sat across from him, confusion and concern painted across her face. "What's going on, Marcus?" He hesitated. "There's a file, a sealed one. Someone's been leaking things about past cases, about misconduct. It wasn't supposed to come up again." She waited, silent. "I reopened an investigation," he continued. "One from years ago. A case involving police brutality, covered up, mishandled, buried. Some of the same officers still work here, including one of the two who just chased me in." The judge's face turned pale. "Why didn't you say anything earlier?" "I didn't want to make it political. I thought if I handled it quietly, maybe I could fix it before anyone got hurt. But now someone wants me gone." Meanwhile, Jamal finally reached his stop. He stepped off the bus and walked slowly toward his apartment complex, still thinking about the woman and the note. He lived in a small place with his mom and younger sister. Nothing fancy, but it was home. His mom worked nights at the hospital, and his sister Mia was only 11. Jamal had taken on the role of protector early on. Life hadn't handed them much, but he was determined to keep pushing forward, one shift, one exam, one day at a time. He went straight to his room, dropped his backpack on the bed, and pulled out the note. It was neatly folded in thirds, like something from a school desk in another lifetime. He opened it carefully, his heart beating a little faster with each second. Inside, the handwriting was elegant, careful. It read, "Dear Jamal, you don't know me, but I know who you are. I've been looking for you for weeks. What you did today seems small to most people, but to me, it meant everything. Please don't ignore this. I need to talk to you, urgently. There's something you deserve to wise. No, it's about your father. I'll be at the old cafe on Franklin Street tomorrow at 5 p.m. Please come. No name, no contact, just a location, a time, and the weight of something bigger than he could have imagined." Jamal stared at the letter for a long time, his mind racing. His father? That was a name not often said in their house. He disappeared when Jamal was only 4. No explanation, no trace. His mother had never said much, just that it was complicated, that he had to go. He thought maybe he'd walked out, left them. But now someone had been looking for him? For weeks? Who was this woman? And how did she know his father? The next day came with a heavy air. At the courthouse, the media had begun to gather. Word had spread fast. There were rumors of conflict, something about police intimidation, a possible leak in the prosecutor's office. Cameras were stationed outside the courthouse steps, but no one really knew what was happening yet. The story was growing, and the town, already tense from years of unspoken truths, was beginning to crack. Inside the building, Marcus Gray sat with his files. He had decided to bring the sealed documents into court, quietly. He knew the risk. These weren't just papers. They were names, dates, incidents that had been swept away with bribes, threats, and silence. And reopening them meant reopening old wounds in a town that had learned to live with its scars. One of those files had a familiar name, Daniel Reed, the same officer who had chased him the day before. 15 years ago, Reed had been involved in a case where a young black man died during a routine traffic stop. There had been questions, protests, but nothing came of it. The file was sealed and everyone moved on. But now a whistleblower had sent Marcus a copy of the original report, along with witness statements that had never seen the light of day. It wasn't just about justice. It was about truth. And Marcus knew the moment he stepped into that courtroom, everything would change for him, for the judge, for the town. At 4:45 p.m., Jamal stood across the street from the old cafe on Franklin. It looked just the same as he remembered from when he was younger. He used to pass it with his dad on the way to the park, back when he was still around, before everything got quiet. The cafe was almost empty. He saw her inside, sitting near the window with a cup of tea and that same calm look on her face. The woman from the bus. She looked up, met his eyes, and gave the smallest, warmest nod, like she already knew he would come. Jamal took a deep breath and stepped off the curb, and that's where the story pauses, because what she was about to tell him would turn his understanding of everything upside down. And back at the courthouse, someone was watching Marcus from the hallway, just out of view. Someone who didn't want those files opened. Someone who knew what secrets were buried in that case, and how far they were willing to go to keep them hidden. Jamal stepped inside the cafe, heart thudding louder with every step. The bell above the door gave a soft ring, but the place was nearly silent, except for the hum of a coffee machine and the quiet clink of a spoon against porcelain. The woman from the bus waved him over gently, her face calm, but her eyes carried something deeper. Grief, maybe, or urgency. He sat down, unsure of how to start. She slid a small manila envelope across the table. "I know this is overwhelming," she said, "but I promise I'm here to help you, not confuse you." Jamal stared at the envelope but didn't open it yet. "Who are you?" "My name's Emily Carter," she replied. "Your father, he saved my life, and I've owed him the truth ever since." That name, his father. Just hearing it spoken out loud again was enough to make Jamal's chest tighten. He leaned in, whispering, "What happened to him? Where did he go?" Emily looked around the room once, then back at Jamal. "He didn't leave you," she said softly. "He was taken." Across town, Marcus Gray sat with Judge Holloway in her chambers. The blinds were drawn. The file lay open on the table between them, pages filled with names, photos, and statements. "These are good people who got silenced," he said. "Most of them are still afraid to speak, but I can't let this stay buried." The judge flipped through the documents, her face growing more tense with every page. She knew what this meant. If these files became public, it could unravel the very system they worked in. Not because justice didn't matter, but because the roots of corruption ran deeper than anyone had ever been willing to admit. "Do you have protection?" she asked suddenly. Marcus nodded slowly. "Not enough. Someone's already watching. Me." Judge Holloway didn't ask who. She had a good guess. Names floated through her mind. Officers with too much power, too many friends in high places. Men like Daniel Reed, who walked around with clean records and dirty hands. The same ones who always seemed to land promotions, no matter what rumors whispered in the hallways. Outside the courthouse, cameras rolled. Reporters tried to dig, but the police kept their mouths shut, and court officials offered no comment. Still, the story had legs. Whispers of internal investigations and old case files were enough to stir public curiosity. And among the crowd stood a quiet figure, a young woman named Brielle. She held her phone close, recording everything. Brielle wasn't just a concerned citizen. She was a student journalist from the local college, and she'd been following this courthouse for months, chasing small pieces of a much bigger puzzle. She had seen Marcus Gray once before, back when he visited the campus to speak on civil rights and law. Back then, she thought he was just another official with a polished speech. But now, watching the tension unfold around him, she realized he might be one of the only ones fighting for something real. Inside the cafe, Jamal finally opened the envelope. Inside was a faded photo. His father, younger, smiling with a badge on his chest. "He was a police officer?" Jamal asked, stunned. Emily nodded. "A detective, one of the good ones. But he got too close to a case involving other officers who were dirty. He tried to report them, but they made it look like he disappeared on his own. Said he ran, that he abandoned everything." Jamal shook his head slowly, struggling to take it in. "But why didn't he ever come back?" "He tried," she said. "But by then they'd already destroyed his reputation. He went into hiding to stay alive. And he asked me to watch from a distance to find you if anything ever happened to him." Emily reached into her bag and pulled out a second photo. This one was recent. It showed a man with graying hair and tired eyes standing near a motel sign on the outskirts of town. "I found him a month ago. He's sick, Jamal, and he wants to see you." Jamal sat back in his chair, overwhelmed. A part of him had always hoped for this. A part of him hated that he had hoped. It felt like a dream twisting into a nightmare, full of questions he didn't even know how to ask. Back at the courthouse, Officer Daniel Reed stood in the parking garage speaking into a burner phone. "He's planning to open the files tomorrow," he muttered. "He's already got the judge looking at them. If we don't stop this now, it's over." The voice on the other end gave a long pause before responding. "Do it quietly. No mistakes." Reed hung up and slid the phone into a storm drain nearby. He looked up at the courthouse steps, where protest signs were beginning to appear. People were waking up. He could feel it. And the more eyes turned toward the courtroom, the more likely the truth would spill out. Inside her small apartment, Brielle sat at her desk, surrounded by papers and clips. She had been following the case of Jamal's father for weeks without even knowing his name. But now, pieces were connecting. She found police reports, anonymous tips, and archived newspaper articles about a promising detective who vanished after investigating internal affairs. All the signs pointed to something bigger, something rotten inside the department. She typed rapidly, piecing the timeline together. Missing detective, sealed brutality case, deputy AG in danger, teen with unexpected ties to the story. Her hands froze for a second. That teen, Jamal, he was the one from the bus story everyone had been talking about online. The kid who gave up his seat. The random act of kindness that started a chain reaction no one could have predicted. The eye. Next morning, the courtroom filled early. Security was tighter. Reporters squeezed into every available space. Jamal sat quietly in the back row, Emily next to him. She didn't say much, just squeezed his hand once as Marcus walked to the front of the courtroom with the sealed file in his grip. This was it, the moment before the drop. The room buzzed with anticipation, but the real danger still lurked in the shadows. And somewhere, deep in the bowels of the courthouse, someone turned off the security cameras, one floor at a time.